Anne-Solange?
Yes, my mother wanted Anne, my father wanted Solange, so I'm the compromise. So I'm called Anne-Solange, which is a double first name.
Yeah.
Like somebody else would be called Mary Jane. And lots of people in the Anglo world, because they're used to double family names, they think I'm Anne and then Solange Noble. But I'm actually Anne-Solange, like somebody else would be Mary Jane, and my family name is Noble.
Very good. Welcome to the Bibliophile.
Oh, thank you.
What do you do?
I license translation rights for the company for which I work and have been working for 28 years. And before that, did exactly the same thing for a preceding company which is called Flammarion, where I did that for 7 years. So I've been in the business for 35 years.
And to be clear, you work for Gallimard.
I worked for Gallimard, Édition Gallimard. Gallimard poached me 28 years ago from Flammarion. Okay. They tried to 27 years ago, and I said, no, I'm fine here, you know. They said, what? You don't say no to Gallimard. But anyway, and they finally convinced me 1 year later. I never wanted to change my job. There never came a moment when I was... In another life, I could have been an editor. I would have loved being an editor. But it would have been another life because I loved so much this job, which I had never heard of. I had no idea what foreign rights meant. So they poached me from Flammarion, but I entered Flammarion answering an ad in the newspaper. I didn't know what it was about. In the interview, I started talking about Belgium, Switzerland and Quebec, and the guy said, well, you would never be working for those countries. And I said, why? And they said, well, because they publish in French. And I said, so what? And he said, hello, foreign rights means that you license translation rights. So you're not going to license translation rights to people who already publish in French. So,
Plus you were perfectly bilingual, I assume,
yes,
were you?
I was born and raised in Canada, with a French mother and a Canadian father, but real Canadian. Graduated from McGill University, and
in what, English?
Actually, in Latin American literature, and after that, when I came to France, thinking I was just going to spend 1 year, but I wanted to know better the country of my mother. Mm-hmm. I knew it from holidays because we had French cousins, so we'd come for the holidays, but I had never spent a year in France, and I entered Sciences Po, the Institute of Political Studies. L'Institut d'études politiques, but we call it Sciences Po here in Paris, and I loved that, and I did international relations, and then I sort of stayed. I sort of loved Paris.
Yeah, you were young and.
I loved Paris. I just loved Paris,
free.
But I always stayed very faithful to Montreal. I always went back. I always go back. Especially at Christmas, because Christmas without snow is not Christmas. So this job, which I had never heard of, which I discovered by fluke, in which I entered without entirely understanding what it was, I realized that I was, in fact, the international agent of the author within the publishing company. This is one of the numerous services of a publishing company, and in this country, there's a synergy that means that, the editor gives his editorial service to the author, and the attaché de presse, as we say in French, I think in English you call it publicity. Publicité for us is something else. But anyway, the attaché de presse offers her that service of being in contact with journalists, and then the sales people offer that service to the author, and the rights department offers that service to the author. So the author of Gallimard, I don't work for other authors, of trying to find as many publishers abroad as possible who will be sufficiently interested in the book that they will want to publish it, which means that we work on behalf of the author. So the contract will be signed with Gallimard. Of course, then we're going to share the proceeds with the author, of course.
What do you mean share? How much goes to the author typically?
It depends on what the author has negotiated with in his head contract with Gallimard.
What typically are we looking at?
Well, originally, typically, and this is true in the Anglo-Saxon world too, 50 years ago, everybody, before agents came in, when it was considered like a marriage between the author and the publisher, the author would bring his manuscript, the publisher would bring his know-how onto publishing it, and in fact they would share, roughly they would share 50-50. It means that if the author was given, say, a 10% royalty on the list price, actually, once the book had been produced, distributed, blah, 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 what would come net to the publisher would also be 10%.
Okay.
So with that rationale, they would say, listen, what we sell in France, let's get to have the same thing, let's say 10% of the list price, and whatever subsidiary rights we can manage to get, again, let's share together. Yep. So with that rationale, it was a 50-50 share of proceeds, because the publisher was the publisher and put in all the money to,
that's right.
and the know-how.
And taken the risk.
And taken the risk. What happened then in the rest of the world, in some countries where agents came in, an agent can work in his living room with a telephone and a computer. An agent doesn't spend money. An agent...
no overhead.
Nothing. I mean, an agent has talent and can use his talent.
Yeah, and contacts.
And contacts and everything that an agent should have. But actually, an agent doesn't put in any money. So the agents started playing on that word of between share of proceeds and commission. Of course, an agent takes a commission, like a real estate agent also takes a commission. So the agent would say, what do you mean 50%? 50%? That's an enormous commission. I only will take 20. If you think of it, Nigel, if you were selling your house and your real estate agent said, I'm only going to take 20% commission, you'd sort of say, hey, wait a minute. I might give you 5 or 6. What do you mean 20? I mean, it's my house. You didn't pay the architect and all that. So when you think of it, a 20% commission is actually not a small one for somebody who has put in nothing at all. But they started saying to the authors, I'll only take 20% rather than your publisher taking 50%. But I know authors who have listened to that, gone to an agent, and then left the agent because the agent had said to the author, I'll only take 20% commission on foreign rights. Mm-hmm. So the author thinks, well, yeah, that's true, it's better than 50%. But first, there's not an obligation de résultat. The agent says, if I manage to sell rights, I will only take a 20% commission. That's one thing, so there's no... But also the small print bottom line sentence in the contract is that they take a 20% commission on everything.
Even so the sales of the books?
Exactly. Yeah. So authors who were already well known, who listened to the agent who said, I'll only take 20% on foreign rights, who signed with the agent. The agent was interested in them and approached them because they were already known and on the bestseller list. The agent was not a discoverer. No. And then I know an author, honestly, I don't want to give her name, but I could, an author who said to me, when I realized that actually I was already known. I was already selling books in France.
And also the publishers that she'd worked with had taken the risk and worked with her to develop her name.
But not there. Yes, but also if an agent takes 20% on sales, then if the author is being paid direct by the publisher, her publisher, 10% royalties, but if the agent takes 20% even on that would be, she would be receiving 8% royalties and not 10, because the agent wasn't only in the contract she signed with the agent. He had insisted on the fact that she would get a better deal on foreign rights. But actually, she was making the most of her money was on the French sales, and she was giving money, a commission on those French sales, and she left the agent. So typically in the past, it would have been 50-50 for all the reasons I told you. But now there are authors who in their head contract with the publisher will sort of say, okay, my first book, I accepted on 50-50. It was a first book. I was so, what would I have done without you? I would have, given my manuscript to my grandmother to read. But it's the added value of being published by Gallimard was so enormous that I accept the 50-50 split between us. It's worked pretty well. Could we say 60-40 split for the second one? And of course, the publisher is going to say yes. So that's the evolution of that. But a share of proceeds, when both people have put an input, the author, his manuscript, the publisher, his publishing skill and name and brand, and that's a share of proceeds. Whereas an agent, whether it's a literary agent or a real estate agent, it's a commission.
Yeah, I mean,
And-
it's quite clear, though, that there's quite a difference in the practice in France as opposed to
In France,
England and the United States,
Yes.
where it's you can't get your manuscript read by a publisher if you don't have an agent.
not only that, if you send it by the post, you're going to receive an answer in reply saying, sorry, we do not accept unsolicited manuscripts not presented by an agent.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I think it's in the Anglo-Saxon world, I mean, I have a brother who lives in America. He has a lawyer. I don't have a lawyer. I mean, I think it comes also from a society that, where maybe it started also with actors having impresarios, and so it comes from a long way back. It's just one intermediary more, because now, since you cannot in the Anglo-Saxon world send a manuscript by the post, so you have to find an agent. So then you send it to 10 agents. Then you're desperately waiting, in France, you're sending it to 10 publishers and you're desperately waiting to have a positive answer. And you have 9 negative answers, and suddenly the phone rings and somebody's going to say, we're taking on your book. When a publisher says that, he's literally going to take on the book and publish it. Whereas when you have 9 agents who, say no or not answer, and finally an agent calls and says, oh, it's interesting, I'll take on your book. There's no obligation de résultat. He's not just saying that he'll take on your book to agent it.
No. He has to make the sale now.
He now has to find, exactly.
Yeah.
So in France, the relationship is so incredibly strong with the great majority. I'm sure you will find, Nigel, lots of people you can interview who will say, I hate my publisher, I need an agent, and blah, blah, blah. It is such an infinitely small proportion that says something in France, because for 20 years now, people have said, you're going to get to it like the Anglo-Americans. What do you think that you're so different, the French and all that? Meanwhile, the French are still not being represented by agents, except maybe 5%, But, our Nobel Prizes are not represented by agents. The great bestsellers, the Amélie Nothomb at Albin Michel, or Muriel Barbery at Gallimard, or Leila Slimani, they don't need agents.
Yeah.
They don't need agents.
And that's because they've got you at Gallimard trying to get foreign rights. So what do you do?
So, for example, the book of Leila Slimani, which was known in America as The Perfect Nanny, which was known in Britain as Lullaby, but it's the same text, it's just a different title. That, and Leila was obviously unknown. That I found 40, before she got the Goncourt Prize, I found 44 different publishers for her. 44, that's 44 languages.
Right, so you got her manuscript.
You
send it out in French?
Always. I don't have a budget to publish it, to translate it in Japanese.
No. So you send it out in French.
In French.
To your network of contacts around the world.
Exactly. And my network of contacts, I know, I've been doing this for 35 years, I know who abroad is interested in French literature. They don't need to read French. Ages and ages and ages ago, when André Chiffrin was thrown out of Pantheon by Alberto Vitali, CEO of Random House, because André Chiffrin was doing authors which Alberto Vitali found were not, sufficiently sellable, like Michel Foucault or Marguerite Duras. Alberto Vitali actually spoke perfect French because he had been raised in Alexandria. So you can be a francophone and not be interested in French literature, and you can be a complete monolingual guy like Roger Strauss, who never spoke anything but English, but was incredibly open and curious about the outside world. So to speaking French does not, if you read French, you can read the manuscript yourself, and if you can't read French, you have readers. If you're not interested in foreign literature, you don't have readers. So I will have people who sort of say, well, I don't read French, and I feel like saying, well, Antoine Gallimard doesn't read Japanese. We still publish Japanese authors. So what does that mean? That we rely on outside readers, of course. That's what you do when you're interested in foreign literature.
So do you you must have an incredible knowledge of all of the different publishing houses out there.
You need to, because I'm a go-between. I want the perfect marriage, the right book with the right publisher, which will mean that I need to know both elements of the marriage. I need to know the book, so I need to read it, evaluate it, be able to have an international eye on it, not a French eye, but that's fine because I was born and raised elsewhere.
Yeah.
So you can have remarkable French books which will not sell. You can have books that I personally find less remarkable, but I know I'll sell them, and I'm here to sell.
And so that's what you look at these
I evaluate
Gallimard books, and in terms of
I evaluate
how
them
easy
myself.
It is,
or difficult but worthwhile.
But okay, sure.
No, the challenge is going to be when it's difficult but worthwhile.
Yes.
I've done that also. You know,
well, that's wonderful
the fun.
publishing.
That's the fun side. You know?
Sure, because you really believe it.
I completely believe in it. You know, I was, as I say, born and raised in Canada, meaning Montreal, which is a bilingual town. And my dad is an Anglophone. Noble is a Scottish name of the Macintosh clan. My mother's French from France. So I was completely raised in a bilingual family. More so in Quebec, where, as you and I know, it can be two solitudes, two different worlds.
Yeah.
And I was at the crossroad of those two different worlds. I think it was written in the stars that I had to find a job where I, you know, even Anne-Solange, Solange, you know, I think my karma was to be that go-between.
To be a bridge, to be that hyphen.
To be that hyphen, to be that extended hand. But you need, if you want to be a good go-between, a bonne marieuse, you know, like in the Middle Ages where, you know, you would have meet this young man, meet this young woman, and the matchmaker, I was looking for the word. If you want to be a good matchmaker, you need to know the two elements. So you need to have read a book to be able to talk about it. You're not going to say, "Oh, this is great, this is wonderful, this is a bestseller," and this, you know, and you somebody's going to look at you in the eye and say, "But Anne-Solange, what do you think of this book?
Is it going to sell? Is it going to make me some money?"
No,
that's what they're saying on the other end.
That is going to be their job and not mine.
No, but they're going to ask you that.
I'm going to say, "You know your Korean market better than me."
Right.
That's their question. They're going to say to me, "What makes this book so interesting? Why should I take a look at this book? I'm being sent thousands of manuscripts. Why should I listen to you, Anne-Solange? Why should I, you know?" And I'll say, "Well, I've read the book. This is what I think of it." And the other side of matchmaking, the other element, and I know you. I've known you for a long time. I know your list. I know your catalog. We've been meeting at Frankfurt.
It fits into your catalog.
You're going to like it.
Yeah.
Maybe if you don't buy it, which, you know, story of my life, people who sort of say, "Anne-Solange, you know, it was a near win. I really like this book." But then I tried to convince my marketing department, and they said that this difficult story, blah, blah, blah. I'm a bad rights person if I receive a letter sort of saying, "To be honest, I don't even understand why you sent me this book. I mean, how could I ever be interested in this?"
What's the most interesting thing about the books that you sell? I mean, obviously,
it always depends on that second element of the matchmaking. It depends on the editor. There are some books that I would never even mention to an editor at Frankfurt, and the next meeting, half an hour later, of the same country, because anyway, you don't sell the same kind of books to an Argentinian or to a Korean. Give me a book on psychoanalysis, guess where I'll sell it? To Argentina, of course. So you have to adapt to that other element in your matchmaking, who is the editor. And I need credibility. I need an editor to think that if I tell him about this book, is that I really believe about the book, but I believe of the book for him. He's going to say, "You've known me for so long, you know what I like, Anne-Solange. Tell me, you know, here are these 35 books of your rentrée littéraire, you know, if you had to tell me about one." That will mean that I will adapt to him, because ultimately, what do I want? I want a contract. I want a contract for the author. I want an edition.
Yeah.
So it's not Gallimard who's going to say to me, "Oh, this is our bestseller that we need to sell, you know, to everyone." I'm going to say, you know, "Excuse me, but you don't know about foreign rights." So, you know, I'll take my own decision there. I will tell the editor about this book, why I think it's good, why I think it's interesting, and why I think it's interesting for him. Then after that, if he buys it, bingo, I'm going to be delighted. If he doesn't, because there are so many other reasons, you know. I mean, Gallimard receives thick talking about agent or not agents, we receive 6,000 manuscripts by the post. And believe it, we read them. 6,000. We don't say we need an agent. And of those 6,000, we say no to most. But there are the ones we say no to because just, we never buy a book like that. And the others where we try to send a letter sort of saying, it's really a good book, a good manuscript, really hope you'll find an editor for that. Because, as you know, in publishing, you can't just take everything that is good. We say no to good books every day. So am I humiliated when I send a good book and the editor says no? Of course not.
You just move along to the next.
Absolutely. And the editor will sort of say, thank you very much for sending me this book. It was a close call. This author seems really interesting. I hope you find another publisher, but keep me posted. Contact me again for the second book, and that means that I did well my job. The guy who says, or the woman who says, contact me for the next book because this is a real voice. I don't want to, I don't want to lose track of that. It didn't work this time, and my CEO said that we had already bought, 2 French books, and that's more than he had thought for in the first while, so there's no way. But so that is my job.
Who do you sell most to in the States?
I thought you were going to say most to in the world. I would have said less to and all the Anglo-American world. As you probably know, Nigel, that... Do you know this website called 3%?
3%, yeah. It's Chad...
Chad Post at Open
Rochester, yeah.
And Chad knows a lot about publishing and translation because for many years he was working at Dalkey Archive Press, which did a lot of translation, and he reads French, and he's very interested in these things. And 3% is a very, very small proportion of titles. It's not a proportion of number of copies, but of titles.
Those that are translated into English.
Yes,
and sold in the States.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In translation, in English translation. And he said 3% because it was too long to put 2.8. And that's 3% including all languages.
That's all languages.
All languages, including a Japanese manga.
Yeah. So who do you sell most to?
So in the States or abroad?
In the States.
In the States, I actually, because c'est mon fer de lance. I mean, I just love selling to the States and to Britain because it's so difficult. I like the challenge. I sort of, nowhere they're going to say no to me. What do you mean say no? I sell the whole range. I can sell to small and wonderful Archipelago, Jill Schoolman in Brooklyn. For example...
Europa, is that another one that you deal with?
That's another one, and we can talk about Europa.
Okay.
I'll just finish because Europa is not led by an American,
no.
So not typically American. But Jill is American. She's a translator, she's completely francophone, francophile. And for example, I sold to her, and this was it was a Frankfurt story. She was my last appointment, and I had the books on the shelves. And I started talking about this author she had never heard about called Scholastic Mukasonga, who's from Rwanda. So being from Rwanda, which is part of the Francophonie, she writes in French. In Frankfurt, people say, seems interesting, send me the book or send me the PDF. They're not going to go back in the plane with all these books. But there she was my last appointment. The book was not very thick. And I said to her, Jill, you need to read in the plane. Take this book, you're going to like it. It was Our Lady of the Nile.
That's a good sales technique.
It was Our Lady of the Nile. She had never heard of Scholastic Mukasonga. Had she not spoken to me, she would never, I just thought, this is for Jill. It's a strong voice, it's a woman, it's of the Francophonie, it's a very strong story. This is for Jill. And I said, Jill, I don't know, you're not a rich publisher. I don't know if you'll be able to buy this book from me, but I know you're going to like it. And so I need to be credible there. I can't say to somebody you're going to like it, and then that person says, and that sort of doesn't know me.
You're wasting their time, right? And they're not going to come back to you.
And they'll never believe me again.
Yeah.
So she read it in the plane, and she made me an offer when she was back. And Jill Schoolman is, she's 3 people in one room of the old American can factory in Brooklyn. But who did I sell Leila Slimani to? John Siciliano at Penguin. This novel, The Perfect Nanny, which was a bestseller in the United States. Mm-hmm. And you wanted to talk about Europa. The 2 publishers which are smaller and independent and personally owned, which buy most translation by far, are two publishers who are not typically American because they were both founded by Europeans. Europa Editions was founded by an Italian called Sandro Ferri, who lives in Rome, and Other Press, which is in New York, in Manhattan, not New Press, which is what André Chiffrin had founded when he was kicked out of Pantheon. Other Press, wonderful publishing company, incredible list. And that was founded by somebody that Americans call Judith Gurevich, but she's Judith Gurevich, and she is actually a Lacanian psychoanalyst, Belgian, of Belgian origin.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
She speaks perfect English, but with a very slight Francophone accent. And the same way, Sandro Ferri speaks good English, but very slight Italian accent. So these two companies, Europa Editions and Other Press, are the ones that publish most translations, and not just from French, from all kinds of languages. So they are more, they're not as small as Archipelago is.
No.
Sandro Ferri with Europa Editions, well, his first bestseller is actually a book that I had sold to him, which was Muriel Barbery, The Elegance of the Hedgehog.
Yes, yes.
Which sold 900,000 copies in the States alone and was more than 60 weeks on the bestseller list of the New York Times.
Right.
So, and that was somebody completely unknown. So, and of course, Elena Ferrante.
Yeah.
But then he's an Italian publisher too, so he's the publisher of Elena Ferrante, so that's something else. So those two are two publishers which have an incredible list of, if you go on their website, you'll see both of them. And in the bigger range of the big five, within the Penguin Random House group, I sell to Penguin, Leila Slimani, The Perfect Nanny. I sell to Knopf, Marine Diaye. The last one they've published several ones, and the last one, is it La Divine? Or no, The Chef, quite recent, last year.
Who do you deal with at Knopf?
Well, The Chef was actually the very last book that was bought by George Andreu.
Before he went to
Harvard.
Yes, okay.
So, and he wasn't replaced as such.
Right.
So today, I would deal probably with Lexi Bloom, because Lexi, who is an editor, more a vintage editor, but actually when you're in that group, you can publish a book at Knopf, you can do it in hardback, or you could do a direct original paperback with vintage. They're not, you could actually maybe put a book in Pantheon. The editors are not cloisonnés by imprint.
Okay.
So today I would probably, for Knopf, I would probably send it to Lexi Bloom. Penguin, I said John Siciliano. Within the Macmillan group, mainly Farrar, Straus and Giroux. And that would be, well, it was Jonathan Galassi, but now the publisher now is Mitzi Angel, who's originally British.
Yeah.
And also
Faber,
Yeah, she was Faber. And she reads perfectly in French, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But also she has a young woman who works there who's Jenna Johnson, who reads French too and who acquires French authors. In HarperCollins, I'm great friends with two wonderful people, completely francophone and all that, but on a personal basis. You know, Jonathan Burnham, originally British, who's the publisher, or I get always confused with the titles because in America you have titles and we don't in France. But anyway, the boss there, and he speaks perfect French. I wonder if his thesis in Oxford wasn't on Proust or something, but he's interested in making the company make money, and he probably believes that you don't make money with French books. So we'll have a wonderful conversation on literature and even on French literature, but he won't buy a book.
Yeah.
Terry Carton, who's been there for more than 3 decades, she reads French. She was an au pair girl when she was 18 in France. She reads French, but no, she doesn't.
They don't want to take the risk on it.
And the bother, and then you have, they read French, but their marketing department doesn't read French, but there's this new imprint at HarperCollins called Harper Via, the Latin word for the way, the trail, like our Via Railway in Canada. And that's interesting too, talking about foreigners who are interested in translation. I told you Sandro Ferri is Italian, that Judith Gurevich is Belgian. Well, actually, at Harper Via, the two heads, the head and her direct number 2, they're not American. Judith Kerr, who used to be at Atria, Judith Kerr is Australian, and Juan Mila is Spanish. And they started, I think Judith Kerr started maybe just 2 years ago, Harper Via. And they already have, or even last year, I don't know, or they bought 2 years ago, but only are just starting to publish because you need time to translate. Between the moment you buy and the moment you publish, you need to translate. So 18 months can go by. And they've already bought at least 3 French books. So Harper Via, I think I don't know, motto is not the term I'm looking for, but their
mission?
It is translation. Okay. It doesn't mean that they won't publish books written in English, but that is the little créneau, the niche that they found, and they intend to do something big with that. And then you still have 2 big ones, but they will...
Simon & Schuster?
You have Simon & Schuster, not much. If you sell to Simon & Schuster, it would be Scribner. And there they have someone called Valerie Steiker. The publisher is, or editor, or whatever you call it in English, is Nan Graham. She has done some books, and so that's big 5, number 4. And then the 5th one is the Hachette group, and within that group it would be Little Brown.
Okay.
Unsurprisingly, Little Brown happens to have published a few French books which happened in France to be published within the Hachette group.
Yeah, it's a coincidence.
I'm not saying that it was thrown down their throat and they bought good books, but I'm just mentioning. So that's so I've mentioned the principal imprints. I've mentioned Europa and other press. I would mention also Grove Atlantic. Morgan Entrekin, a formidable guy, so that's an independent company, he owns it. He's very open to translations. He doesn't read himself, but he's very open to translations. His primary mission is not translation, his primary mission is American.
But I mean, they've got Beckett, and he wrote in French.
Yeah, that's true, but I can give lots of examples of books that were published in the 60s, but we're not talking then of today. You see what I mean?
No.
Sometimes you interview publishers, they don't have many, and so they will give you a whole list, and you'll sort of say, yeah, but Camus is dead, and Malraux is dead, and Gide is dead.
They're still making good money off
they're
them,
making good money, but I'm talking about recent or semi-recent books being published in translation. Let's talk about today, because if not, they're going to brouiller they're going to say, look at our list, and you feel like saying, okay, could you give me your list in the last 5 years? That's more interesting. What Morgan Entrekin did, and he's great. He goes to Frankfurt. And when he goes to Frankfurt, he doesn't go to meet, like a lot of Americans, they go to Frankfurt to meet the Brits. He meets his international colleagues and all that. And he hired an editor called Peter Blackstock. And Peter is, again, European. He's British. He has a very British name because that's the name of his father, but his mother is from Punjab or something like that. He's what we would say Indo-Britannique. I don't know. His mother he's completely British, but what I mean is that, again, I was talking once to somebody else in England who's half something else, half Indian. Ravi Mirchandani, he's completely British and he doesn't speak an Indian language, but he was one day saying to me, we people of a mixed marriage, like I am.
Yes.
I'm of a mixed marriage. So both of them
You're
are
more
white.
outward looking, I suppose.
We know that there's not just one truth in one part of the world. So Peter Blackstock, he speaks 5 languages because, of course, speaks English, he speaks French. I think he did Russian at Oxford. And then he's at least reading knowledge of another one and maybe vague knowledge of a 5th one. So it's no coincidence that Morgan Entrekin hired him.
Now, you gave me, before we started, an article that you'd written about your role as the seller of rights to the world.
The column of The Joys of Selling Rights to America.
You'd written it about 30 years ago. Was
exactly.
it for Publishers Weekly, was
Publishers Weekly.
Yeah.
It was. That was so much fun because it wasn't to the world. It was called The Joys of Selling Rights to America.
Okay, so I've got some questions based on that article. Okay, so first of all, you call selling rights to the Americans a real obstacle course. Now, why'd you say that? And is it still?
The first obstacle is, at the time, okay, let's go back in time, but between you and me, I don't know if things have changed that much because we're still at the 3%, so you can interview Chad Post on this. But let's say 30 years ago, first of all, how'd you get an editor to be interested in your book? So you send the manuscript. Actually, I'm not in a hurry to sell the work unless it's a very, very, it's something recent on
topical.
A Trump invading China.
Yeah.
But that would become quickly obsolete, and we'll have to sell it quickly. But if it's a novel, why should I send something where people say, translate? Why translate? We have enough good books in English. So I will not try uphill. I'll try to sell in other countries first. I'll try and see how the sales are. If there's a press. I prefer to not send out a book immediately and wait 6 weeks and try to get a contract in German and Spanish and Italian and whatever.
It's because it's easier to do that?
Of course, because they're interested.
Right.
They don't say, hey, what's this book of Gallimard? They say, oh, Anne-Solange is sending me a book. Must be good.
Because they recognize that Gallimard publishes really good books. Is that it?
But they recognize that other people publish good books too. But they publish not 3% books in translation. They publish 20 to 25% books in translation.
Sure.
So they're interested. The same way you can be interested in going to see a foreign movie.
They're interested in publishing great literature.
Exactly. And great literature is not only written in Spanish or only in Italian or only in French or, by the way, only in English. So the first obstacle is to how do you get somebody interested? Well, you certainly don't send the book immediately. You wait till you have, ammunition.
Yeah.
So you wait till you can sort of say, this came out 6 weeks ago, it's already on the bestseller list, and we already have 3 contracts, and here's the prize, blah, 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 and all that.
Because they've got thousands of prizes in France.
So you send the book. And by the way, it's been in the media. Do you think anybody, you have Italians who are saying, oh, Anne-Solange, I saw that this won a prize. Should I look at it? You never have an Anglo-Saxon saying that, so you go to them.
They never call you, in other words.
No. So they have enough good books in English. So the first obstacle is to get the editor interested.
Incidentally, sorry to jump in here, but I'm just looking at it. And speaking of George Andreu.
Yeah.
Did you sell him the Piketty?
No, it's a Seuil book. It's not Gallimard. It's Le Seuil. We work within our company.
Understood.
It's a famous synergy. In the same way, our attaché de presse, which you call publicity, will talk to the journalists of a Gallimard book. Even if they love the Seuil book, they're not being paid to promote the Seuil book.
Of course.
And by the way, we receive a salary, but not a commission.
Oh, you don't get any incentives to sell more?
I don't want an incentive.
Why not?
Because if I had a financial incentive...
You'd be pushing stuff that sells more easily, I suppose.
Exactly. And not only that, but if there are 3 publishers interested, and there's one, big fatso with lots of money, and who wants to buy a literary author to sort of say, but the book does not correspond to that list, I mean, in the same way, if I have Gallimard can do very commercial authors too. We don't just do highbrow.
No, you got to make some money.
No, but we also believe in giving. It's not just a question of money. We believe in giving.
You need money. You need money in order to publish the books that won't sell.
No, but we do commercial fiction that we're proud of. Also, I mean, there are wonderful commercial books. We're not snobs on that. People outside Gallimard are more snobs than we are. We did La Série Noire with all these polars in the time of Gaston Gallimard. It's the outside people who think that we're snob. They're snob. We're not. No. There are wonderful commercial manuscripts which deserve to be published. And if I have a very more commercial, good quality but commercial novel, I should not sell it to a very sort of, highbrow, elegant, intellectual publisher because he won't know what to do with it.
You don't sell them to a university press, for example.
Exactly. So if I have a very literary author who's starting to have a name, and I have a super duper big offer from one of the big commercial groups who can't offer as much as the smaller independent publisher. But actually, I think the smaller independent publisher will do a better job,
Like Archipelago or Europa.
Yeah, or other press or Grove Atlantic or whatever, because at the end of the day, even if the big fatso offers, I don't know, $30,000, whereas, the small publisher offered $5,000. Yes, but you know what? $30,000 in a very big group, it's nothing compared to the super blockbuster. So ultimately, when the book comes out in 18 months, because it is not yet translated, and therefore the momentum will have gone down, and the market people say, that one just cost $30,000. What do we care? We have to fight for the one for which we had to buy the rights for $900,000. So you have to put the right book with the right publisher. It's always the same thing.
The matchmaking,
The matchmaking.
Yeah.
So going back to...
Obstacles.
The first obstacle is to interest the editor. The editor is then convinced of the quality of the book. And the obstacle which he has is that he wants to convince his CEO of taking on the book. And the CEO says, do you think we're going to make money with this? Who's this guy? Never heard of him, and the editor says, well, actually quite well known in Europe. I mean, Anne-Solange already sold the rights in, 10 countries, so no, you can't say he's unknown. Well, he's unknown in the States, whatever. So the editor is going to have to convince his publisher. So that's the second obstacle. Then the third obstacle is that I'm thrown like David in the lion's den in the hands of the contracts person who says, well, we're sending you our contract. I say, no. When you sell a book to France or Italy or Spain, you sell your contract. That's fine. The international custom is to sell on the seller's contract, but you can't have it both ways. So if you sell on an American contract, you're going to have to buy on a foreign contract.
What does that mean?
It means that if I sell a book, all my contracts.
You're using Gallimard contracts.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In English.
Yeah, of course.
Well, of course, I could say...
But it's to your benefit. That's why you want to use your...
It's not to our benefit. It's a marriage. It's a marriage contract. You can't have two marriage contracts. You have one. So
Right.
who's going to draft it? It's a question of reciprocity. I cannot stand the diktat of saying, well, it's going to be our way anyway. The American way of doing things, We sell on an American contract, we buy on an American contract. I say, no, we can negotiate the contract. It's a question of, you're not going to draft both. That's all. Hello, reciprocal treatment. And then I say, no, but don't worry, I'll send it in English. And they say, of course. I feel like saying, well, not of course. I could have sent it in French, couldn't I? So then the obstacle is the contracts in the big companies. And that was true 30 years ago. Little by little, I've been negotiating boilerplates where, now it's accepted. But in those days, and they'd sort of say, I'm sorry, it's against a corporate policy. And I feel like saying, cut it out. We are not your slaves. You can't just, this diktat isn't it. And I'll tell you a story which you don't necessarily need to say as such. Or I'll tell you a story and I won't tell you who's the publisher.
Sure.
Many years ago, I had this problem with one of the big ones. When the microphone is off, I'll tell you the name, but one of the really big ones. And so there was this problem, and I said no, and they said yes, and they said because our contract needs to be ruled by French law and by American law. I said no, when you sell us a book, it's ruled by American law. Again, it's a question of reciprocity.
Yeah, they're buying. They're the purchaser.
They're the purchaser of a novel for which we have the rights because there's a head contract signed between the author and Antoine Gallimard under French law. So any subsidiary right of that, and by the way, I said, you're a subsidiary right, your translation, that's a subsidiary right. They didn't like the idea of being called a subsidiary right.
That's right.
And I said, but the
It sounds like a bit of a, we've got egos here, the France and America.
It wasn't an ego on my side. It's not ego on my side.
Okay.
Ego, I would put ego somewhere else.
Okay.
When I'm talking about reciprocity, I'm talking about fair treatment.
Okay.
I'm just talking about that.
Okay.
And don't forget that I'm not that French because I'm Canadian. So it's I don't have that complex that many French have.
Yeah.
Oh, les Américains, all that. No, I mean, my family name is Noble. It's an Anglophone name, no, I don't have any complexes, actually. But I'm a good Canadian, too. We don't like being rolled over by that big... what did Trudeau say once? That it was difficult being a mouse sleeping beside an elephant. So it's just a question that I cannot stand that diktat of saying it's going to be our way. You feel like saying, are we two equal partners here? Well, then reciprocal treatment. In that story, they said that they wanted American law. I said I can't. It's a very, very highbrow publisher. And they were so sure, the contracts person was so sure that I would be so, I managed to get that publisher, that I'd give in. And I didn't give in. And believe it or not, I took back the book. And I did not sell it to them.
Did you sell it to someone else?
I actually didn't find, so it was, I was pretty courageous because I didn't have another American editor, but I did it, though I didn't have anybody up my sleeve. So believe me, I did not sleep well that night. Because I owe it to the author, but there are principles on which you can't be stamped, because after that, all the other books after that, they would have said, well, you accepted it the first time, so you have to accept it now. So it's very important to these precedents. And thank goodness I sold it to a British publisher.
Okay,
So,
and then they turned around and sold it into America, or
no,
you
they
don't
were
know?
they managed to they didn't sell it into America. They distributed it in America.
Oh, I see.
It was a big enough publisher. It wasn't just a small
Yeah,
one. So she
yeah.
did get the author did get her.
That's good.
But little did I know that 6 months later I was going to have the hottest manuscript that you will ever get, which I'll tell you after we've put this off. But I will tell you. And there, they wanted it. The editor.
Why can't you tell me the title on air here?
Because I seem to be criticizing which I am this publisher, and I don't want to.
Sure, okay.
Okay,
Yep,
if that's fair enough.
yep. Did they get the one that's really, really hot or not?
Yes, because the editor phoned me. It was another editor phoned me, and she said.
On your seller's contract?
She phoned me just to said we want to make an offer. The book, it was in the newspapers and all that,
Sure.
but we had. I'll tell you why it was so important. She phoned me because in those days there are no emails. She phones me and she said, "We're very, very interested." And I said, "And so you should be." And it was the manuscript of a dead author anyway. And she said, "Well, of course we're ready to make an offer." And I said, "Well, I'm certainly ready to receive your offer. By the way, it will be on my contract, and it will be ruled by French law," which they had never, ever in their life done. Signed a contract ruled by French law. And the contract person that said, it's against our corporate policy, and blah, 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 blah. 6 months before.
It's against the...
It's against their corporate policy.
Yeah, got it.
So, and I said, well, it's going to be my contract in English, and it doesn't. My contract means that you can make all
You can
kinds.
change,
Of
yeah.
course,
Yeah,
of course, there are things we can. But it will be ruled by French law. And she went she hung up. She went to see the CEO, and also, and I said, and you know what? If you don't want to, guess how many people are standing in line to buy that thing.
So
She
you're
said,
in a position of power.
yes,
Yeah.
but they had it had been in a way distressing and humiliating to have to take back the contract, the old, not humiliating because I fought back, but it was a difficult decision to take, which I took. But there I was sort of saying, and I didn't have anybody else, and then I sold to British and all that, but this time I was sort of saying, guess how many people are standing in line to buy it? So I didn't use that tone, and I was much nicer, of course. And she went to see the CEO, and she said, I've known Anne-Solange for 5 years now. She's dead serious. So do we want this book? And if we want it, we're going to sign her contract ruled by French law. And guess what happened? They signed it. It was ruled by French law. And from there on, they couldn't say. And then when it happened, and I said, strange, I had been told that it was impossible. Impossible. Well, obviously it wasn't impossible. So once you start, that's why it's important that you have your principles, not to be stubborn, but to know why you have principles, because then you can start a very good relationship, because once you have that obstacle of the contracts person, the contracts department, I'm not a contracts department, I don't have a contracts department. I want one intermediaire. I want to talk to one person. So here I am talking to the editor, we're talking about literature. I did a first class honors in Hispanic studies at McGill University, and I can talk about books, and we meet at Frankfurt, and we meet abroad, and we have this intellectual conversation, and then they throw me in the hands of the contracts person? That's not fair. I want to have one interlocuteur and not be in contact with people who sort of say, oh, well, if it's a dangerous product, I have to be insured against it, and you feel like saying, it's not an unwritten book. It's not an unwritten manuscript. It's not a 3-page synopsis. It's a book which not only has been written, it has been published, and it has been published 6 months ago by Gallimard. And no, we did not have a lawsuit, so it's not dangerous. And 5 publishers abroad have bought it. What the hell are you talking about? Could we come back to something a more reasonable conversation? So those were things that in those years 30 years ago, I found it extremely irritating. But I thought the only way I can talk about it is to do it with humor. And that column, it was at the time, it was a column called My Say. It was Daisy Merilis who had that column. I had met her at the Jerusalem Book Fair, and she had said, send me something. And then I had done that, and it really made, I think I received 30 faxes. I mean, I remember somebody from Doubleday sort of saying, those are the years when, of course, it's in paper. Mm-hmm. For lunchtime, I went to the cafeteria and took Publishers Weekly with me. Anne-Solange, I nearly choked on my pizza when I read your piece. It was hilarious and so cruel and blah, blah, blah. So at the time, it made a lot of noise.
Has it improved?
Well, that's the reason I sent it to you. I won't answer that. I'll let you think if it's still at 3%, if we still have difficulties in selling a book, if we still have people saying, translate, why translate? I have enough good books in English, or I don't read French, or has it improved? It has a bit. The big publishing companies, once they started seeing that there were bestsellers which were not written in English, once they saw that there was, Knausgaard,
Archipelago, yeah.
Yeah, and then was taken by FSG, but he's Norwegian, isn't he?
Yes.
In Norwegian, it's Min Kamp. I don't know My Battle or My Struggle. Okay. Mm-hmm. When they started seeing that The Elegance of the Hedgehog of Muriel Barbery, that My Struggle of Knausgaard, that the L'Amica Geniale of Elena Ferrante, that there were some books which were reaching the bestseller list, and they started thinking, and published by publishers who were looking at translation. Mm-hmm. So the big groups started thinking, maybe we're missing out on something. The smaller publishers had always known that it was interesting. So there is less arrogance. I find that very arrogant, and it was said to me, translate, why translate? We have enough good books in English. And I felt like saying, you know what? We have enough good books in French, by the way, because it's not just France that writes in French. There's Quebec, Belgium, Switzerland, the whole of North Africa, and half of sub-Saharan Africa. Mm-hmm. You only know about Anglophone Africa, but there's a lot of Francophone countries too. And we have Haiti, and we have, you know what? We have a lot of good books written in French, and we still do translations. What about the Spaniards? 20 countries speak Spanish. So you could always say, oh, well, the Slovenian authors are wonderful, but it's a small country with a smaller population. So you could always say, or the Dutch, not many people. So, are they interested in the outside world also because they're a smaller country? Well, maybe, but the bigger countries are interested. So that kind of attitude, why translate? We have enough good books in English, which was said to me and which I found incredibly arrogant. And believe me, did I answer? Because nobody's going to say that to me in my face. Mm-hmm. There's less of that. There's a more modest attitude of saying, I'd really like to do a book in translation. Tell me, what would you recommend? At least le discours is less arrogant.
More accepting.
I would say
the possibility.
God knows if they accept it deep down inside, because if not, they would do more translation. But at least they've realized that arrogance, big mouth arrogance, just makes them look like ugly Americans, and maybe they don't want to look like an ugly American, you see? So, quote unquote, of course. So there's a better attitude. There's a less arrogant attitude towards the fact that there is good literature in translation. Maybe it's not exactly the profile of their company, but they're attentive to what the other people do, and isn't it wonderful? And at least there's less arrogance in the attitude. So that's very helpful. Mm-hmm. There's still a problem with the contracts departments of the big companies. So what I'm doing, big group by big group, I wait till they really want a book, and then I negotiate as close as possible to what I think is the perfect consensus between both. But I won't give in on the as long as they impose American law when they sell a book, there's no reason they can't accept the reciprocity. And I feel like saying, excuse me, but French law is actually very civilized law. So I negotiate. So I now have the perfect contract with Penguin Random House. They make an offer tomorrow. I just say, same contract, right? And they say, yes, of course. I have the perfect contract with FSG if they're interested in the book. So that helps. That helps, you know.
Well, plus you can say with all of the others, no, the FSG and
Yes.
Penguin, they used my contract, so.
Yeah, so you do that little by little, you know. So that helps. So legal. I mean, I'm not a legal person. I never studied law. You know what? We send my assistant sends the contract. I mean, just contract needs to be something you can understand. I mean, they send those contracts 25 pages. Ours make 4 pages. So that has become better. The main obstacles are still there. So in that sense, that column is still true, but at a less, c'est moins exacerbé, at a lesser, it's still an obstacle course. Mm-hmm. Because if not, you'd learn that in America, they publish 20% of the production is translation. Mm-hmm. So ask Chad Post what he thinks. He'll tell you it's still an obstacle course. But I find that the attitude is better, more open, less arrogant. And also, what started happening is that the Americans started realizing that there were so many things they didn't understand. They knew nothing of the Arab world, and then bang, the Twin Towers are attacked, and they sort of feel like saying, how could anybody do this to us? And feel like saying, I don't know, open a history book and just read the last 50 years. Maybe they will give you a few clues.
What did we do to deserve that?
What did we do to deserve that? And who are these Arabs anyway? Mm-hmm. And we have a head start in Europe on that because we have a strong Muslim population. So the sudden interest in the Arab world meant that they started looking at and we have wonderful French authors of Arab origin. Forget Muslim or not Muslim, Arabs. They're called Tahar Benjeloun, and they're called Leila Slimani, and they're called Boualem Sansal, and they're
What about black authors?
We have lots, but
from Africa, I guess.
We have 2 kinds. We have the ones who are French by birth from the Caribbean, Martinique and Guadeloupe. For example, Patrick Chamoiseau, who got the Goncourt Prize maybe 25 years ago. Patrick Chamoiseau is from Martinique. He got the Goncourt Prize. Interesting that it was bought by one of the only African-American editors at the time, Errol MacDonald. Errol MacDonald bought it. Wonderful, incredible book. Really, Goncourt Prize is the highest prize you can get in France.
What's the title in English?
Texaco.
Texaco?
Yeah. It was called Texaco.
Yeah.
Because Texaco, the oil company, Texaco, was a rough suburb of the capital of Martinique. That's where the poor people live, because they live near the gas station. Okay,
you're looking at your watch. Yeah. So one more question, and that is...
And just to finish on the black authors, we have the ones who are French because they're from Martinique, Guadeloupe, or Guyane, and then we have all the ones of our African colonies, Scholastique Mukasonga, who's from Rwanda, Natasha Apana, who's from Mauritius. We have authors from different countries of sub-Saharan, Black Africa, if you want to call it that way.
Yes, and I think there would be an increased interest in Black authors these days.
Yes, because there seems to be Black Lives Matter that interest in there. Yeah. And your ex-president had a Kenyan father.
The American's ex-president. I'm Canadian. Yeah.
Yes, that's true. Yes.
Just like you are.
Yes, thank goodness. Let's not mix things. Sorry, it's because we're talking about American publishing, but absolutely.
Okay, so the book that you think is terrific that you're trying to sell to an English language publisher. What is it, and can you pitch it in 3 minutes?
I should have thought of that one because we're just in the rentrée littéraire now, and the books have just come out 1 week ago. There's one novel which is called The Anomaly, L'Anomalie. Oh no, that's it. It's sold. Sorry, I just sold it.
Oh, you sold it? Well done.
I'm silly. No, I've already sold that one. I've already sold L'Anomalie. I've already sold Fille by Camille. There's one which I find really good, which is called Les choses humaines, human things. We actually brought it out 1 year ago by Karine Tuile. And we already have 10 contracts, but not in
with
English.
around the world.
Around the world, and not yet in English.
Okay.
So,
and what's so good? What's so interesting about it?
It's the story of set in France, where a young man goes to a party with a young girl whom he knows, doesn't know her well, but she's actually the daughter of his stepfather, or the boyfriend of his mother. He takes her out to a party, and after the party, they go and buy some pot or some grass or something, and then they want to smoke it, and so they hide in the garbage thing and all that. And then after that, he said, "Oh, let's go back to the party," and she says, "No," and she goes home, and next day she files a lawsuit against him, and she says she was raped.
Sounds like Julian Assange.
No, it's the story that happened at Stanford many years ago.
Oh, yes.
This guy, and of a bourgeois family and all that, and how you're treated when you sort. But the interesting thing is that, of course, nobody was there, so the scene is not described.
That's
so
right.
it's
He
one
said,
word against
she said.
She says yes, and he says, "What? Never?" And then going to say, "Did you have sex?" He said, "Well, yes, but that's what us young people do. They're 20 or something. They're not 15." He said, "Well, yeah, we're having pot, and so we had a." Yes, that's what I never forced her, she followed me to
It was
smoke.
consensual.
It was consensual. What are we talking about? I would never rape a woman. And she says, yes, I didn't want this and all that. So the first half of the book is putting in place the different characters who are really interesting. The mother, the father, the boyfriend, the girlfriend.
And all of their position on what
their
happened.
position and their position in society. And then the second half is going to be the trial, and it's one word against the other.
Right.
And he seems completely sincere. She seems completely sincere. Meanwhile, he was supposed to go back to the States where he was studying. Of course, with the trial, he can't. He says, she's wrecking my life. She says, he's wrecked my life because I can't sleep at night. And it's one word against the next. It's just very, very well done.
And what's the name of it again?
It's called Les choses humaines.
The human things. And the author?
Karine, Karine, Tuil, Tuil. And she's already published in 10 countries. And actually, funny, I just again sent the book yesterday. It just happened that I sent the book yesterday to one of the big publishers. So saying, I'd like to get back to you on this one because meanwhile, we've sold 220,000 copies.
In France.
In France. We've sold in 10 countries. She got the Prix Goncourt des lycéens, not the Prix Goncourt, but the Prix Goncourt des lycéens.
What's that?
There are several Prix Goncourt.
Different types.
Yeah,
right?
the one which is called is Le Prix Goncourt, but then you have the Prix Goncourt.
The first novel. And
you have the Prix Goncourt for the first novel. You have the Prix Goncourt given by teenage lycéen people in high school. You have the Prix Goncourt for the short stories. And
I see.
But it means that it can talk to young people. Mm-hmm. But it also got the Renaudot, or I don't remember which one, which is more elder people. So you can obviously young people and more mature people can. And so I just sent it yesterday. I was saying, listen, I'm not trying to hype this. I'm not expecting a ridiculous advance. I'm just saying, and you're a woman, and this is a strong woman voice. And the book just came out in Germany. Oh, I know why I sent it, because the book just came out in Germany. And there was an article like this in the Spiegel.
Okay.
And then I said, you know what? You didn't believe me a year ago. I think you should start believing me, because it's not just me who says it.
That's right. That's a good selling technique.
Well, you have to adapt by each person, and each editor.
Well, that's good. I wish you best of luck selling that.
Thank you very much. And all the rest. We also work on the backlist, of course. You can also sell books which...
that's become topical after things change, don't they? Yeah.
So that's it. We could still speak for an hour, I'm sure.
I know. Thank you very much.
Not at all.
And
I love my job.
Yes, I can tell.
I'm passionate.
Yes, because our listeners can't really see you.
No, they can't.
But you're very physically into it.
Well, I don't know. I have a certain vivaciousness, I suppose.
Right. Thank you for being so vivacious during this conversation. I've been speaking with Anne-Solange Noble, who is in charge of international...
One thing has changed last January.
Okay.
Last January, after 27 years of being here, I said to Mr. Gallimard that I wanted to go half-time, and because I want to regain time for myself.
Yeah.
And if I was going half-time, I didn't want to head the department anymore, and I wanted to keep only the English language.
Oh, very good.
Which was the language of my father, which is the language which is more difficult. And I said, put anybody at the head of the department, but that person will not have jurisdiction over me. I want to be autonomous in English, completely autonomous, so I depend directly from the CEO. And I said, I'll retire in 3 years, and whoever you put in my place will recuperate English language.
Very good.
And at the beginning, they sort of thought it was a strange idea, and I said, listen, it's a win-win situation. I'm happy to regain time, and whoever is going to take charge of that is going to be so happy to be rights director of Gallimard that yes, that person can wait 3 years to get the English language, which is the most difficult one in the first place.
Anyway, yeah. And you can bump it up from 3 to 10% in the meantime, right?
I will not change America. America has to change.
Very good. Thanks again.